Hello, Rama Pupodu. Hope all are in good health, feeling great, wonderful, having a happy and peaceful life. Now let's continue with the next devotee, Muruganar. History has recorded the illustrious lives of saints like Jnana Sambandar, Mirabai, and Andal, whose time on earth culminated in their being absorbed into a flame and merging with the Lord. However, one of Bhagavan's devotees, a remarkable poet saint, began his spiritual life with the darshan of a huge flame on his very first meeting with his guru in 1923 at Ramana Ashramam. In subsequent days, whenever he looked at Bhagavan, he saw a luminosity surrounding the holy form. This devotee was Muruganar, a Tamil poet who was held in the highest esteem by the Tamil community. As a renowned Tamil teacher and scholar, he actively served in a committee of Tamil scholars who were engaged in the tremendous task of preparing volumes of the first Tamil lexicon. Muruganar was deeply devoted to Lord Shiva. He spent much of his time reading Tiruvashakam, a poetic outpouring of ecstasy experienced by Manikavashakar, a saint and devotee of Shiva, who lived 700 years ago. Whenever he read it, he would yearn for the same ecstasy and fulfillment that Manikavashakar felt in his Siva Bhakti. It was around this time that his father-in-law presented him with two books written by Bhagavan, Who Am I? And Arunachala Studi Panchakam, the former a work of Jnana Marga and the latter an outpouring of devotional songs drenched in bhakti. He read them many times over and soon learnt from his friends that Bhagavan was in a state of constant wisdom that was unheard of in recent times. Muruganar felt a deep longing to visit and serve this saint and receive his blessings in the form of divine ecstasy. He left for Tiruvannamalai, and as soon as he reached the Arunachaleshwara temple, he wrote 11 extempore verses in praise of Bhagavan, addressing him as Shiva. He then went to Ramana Ashramam, which in September 1923 was only a few thatched sheds. Just as auspicious events are heralded by signs, before he went in, Bhagavan himself came out. This is how Muruganar describes his first darshan. When I looked at the entrance, I saw a brilliant light, a jyoti, a huge flame, which blinded my eyes. Ecstatically, I tried to read out the verses I had written, but profuse tears prevented this. Then, from the flame emerged a human form, Bhagavan. He asked me to hand him over the paper I was holding. Bhagavan read the poems aloud and remarked, "This reads just like Tiruvachakam. Continue writing like Manikavashakar." Bhagavan then looked deeply at me. After a while, I returned to normal consciousness, with devotion welling up, and in all joy and gratitude, I looked up at Bhagavan. Those gracious eyes of Bhagavan pierced through me, opening me instantaneously into a state of bliss that I had never experienced before. That look of Bhagavan unleashed ecstatic poetry in my heart. From then on, hundreds and hundreds of poems began to gush forth. I would place them before Bhagavan and he would edit them. Muruganar was choked with emotion when he narrated this to me. It was a great spiritual experience for me that day. Instantly, he added, Bhagavan became my God, my master. I was wholly convinced that Bhagavan was a manifestation of Lord Shiva himself. And as my new owner, he made my eye and my mind his own, in the same way that wax melts on encountering fire. On seeing Bhagavan, my mind dissolved and lost its separate form. Like a calf that has found its mother, my heart rejoiced at his holy feet. Devotion surged in me like an ocean that has seen the full moon. It is a truth to be rejoiced over by serious seekers that the divine consummation between the illuminating Guru and the illustrious disciple was sealed and sanctified that day by the Lord. For Muruganar, this instantaneous consummation was the commencement of his spiritual life. He worked in Chennai as a teacher to support his mother and wife and had to go back to work. After 3 months, he returned. When he looked at Bhagavan, he again had the vision of luminosity enveloping his form. By this time, Muruganar was completely enveloped in the ocean of Bhagavan's grace. But he still had to travel between Arunachala and Chennai because of his responsibilities. He was deeply attached to his mother. Muruganar once told me that he was torn between his devotion to his master and his affection for his mother. It was literally quite difficult for him to catch the train back to Chennai, lost as he was in his state of ecstasy. Sometimes, with tears of bliss streaming down his face, he would literally walk backwards the 3 miles from the ashramam to the railway station and roam about on the platform. The train would arrive and depart, with him being blissfully unaware of it. On being told by a porter or the station master that the train had left, he would come back to Bhagavan, still sobbing ecstatically. When Bhagavan saw this was happening repeatedly, he asked Kunju Swami or Vishwanatha Swami to accompany Muruganar with specific instructions, put him on the train, and return to the ashramam only after the train leaves. Muruganar's mother passed away in 1924. He performed the last rites, took some portion of the ashes in an urn, and came to Bhagavan. When Bhagavan saw the distressed Muruganar, he inquired, How were you able to complete the last rites in this state? Muruganar broke down on hearing this. So touched was he by his master's solicitude. Someone mentioned that the ashes were kept in an urn outside. Bhagavan then directed Muruganar to take the ashes to Agni Tirtham, a pond near Ramana Ashramam, and immerse them there. Muruganar wept as he told me what a compassionate master Bhagavan was. He resigned from his job and cut off all worldly ties and came to Bhagavan in 1926, totally surrendering himself. Bhagavan welcomed him wholeheartedly. From then on, a new chapter in Muruganar's life began. Muruganar tried to assist the ashram management in its day-to-day activities. He tried his best to accomplish his worldly tasks successfully, but his whole attention was turned inwards towards practice. He felt he was not fit to do any worldly work and wondered if he should just leave the ashram and live independently. When he expressed this, Bhagavan encouraged him to move to nearby Palakuttu. From then on, Muruganar spent most of his time at Bhagavan's feet, leading an austere life and freed from worldly duties. I think I should beg for food, he suggested to Bhagavan one day. Bhagavan shared his consent in the most beautiful and natural way. In Muruganar's case, he did not say, "All right, go and beg." Instead, he gave him the names of the streets where he should and should not beg. Muruganar was in a state of ecstasy. He would beg for food and then bring it to Palakuttu. Being very fastidious, he would go to the pool there, wrap the food in a cloth, tie it to a tree, and then go about elaborately washing his hands and feet. On many occasions, monkeys stole his food, and he went hungry. Yet he never complained. On the contrary, he was in joy. Bhagavan's presence inspired the poet in him. He composed hundreds of verses along the lines of Tiruvachakam, as Bhagavan had inspired and instructed him to do. These poems were collected by other devotees, and a private publication called Ramana Sannidhi Murai, Prayers and Praises in the Presence of Ramana, was brought out. The beauty of this book is that it has 1850 extempore verses seen, edited, and titled by Bhagavan. What is the importance of this book? Muruganar himself declares, "Know that the function and purport of Ramana Sannidhi Murai is to abide at the feet of the bounteous Guru, Ramana, so that the darkness, the delusion of egoism may cease, being dispelled by the illumination of Lord Ramana's grace." When Muruganar came to Bhagavan, he had not read any Vedantic text, so he was more receptive to Bhagavan's teaching and was able to imbibe them more easily, particularly the direct teachings of Bhagavan's self-enquiry. Whenever devotees put questions to Bhagavan and he answered them, Muruganar would return to his art and write down those answers as poems. Those questions and answers ran into hundreds of verses and were collected and printed as Guru Vachaka Kovai, garland of Guru's sayings. Here too, every verse was edited, titled, and approved by Bhagavan. Both of these books have been translated in English. What is the substance of Guru Vachaka Kovai? One of the verses explains it. Give up the thought that this frail body is you. Pursue the self within, which is eternal bliss. This body which you think you are is not true, is not you. The real you is within you as the truth. Pursue it, do self-enquiry and find it. Muruganar went on to write many excellent works like Ramana Devamalai, Sri Ramana Charana Pallandu, Sri Ramana Anubhuti, and Sri Ramana Jnanabodham. The spiritual function behind all his books can be categorized under three heads: prayers and praises, the pure and direct teaching, and the inner ecstasy of spiritual experience. It was to accomplish this that our beloved Bhagavan blessed him with poetry. As Muruganar said, "I had no other thought while writing these books. Bhagavan being the truth, he occupied my heart so completely that I wrote only on Ramana, my ecstatic devotion to him, and the affirmation of his direct teaching." When his first book, Ramana Sannidhi Murai, was released, it met with much opposition and criticism, so much so that it was banned from circulation. The reason this book was so vehemently opposed by the ashram management was a verse in the book which said, directing his supreme grace with a single instance glass. Bhagavan Ramana rooted out my ego and bestowed on me in exchange his own state of supreme bliss. This was an extempore verse. It created a furor because its opponents thought it was Muruganar's egoism that made him claim that he was equal to Bhagavan. One day, when seated in the hall of Bhagavan's presence, Vishwanatha Swami observed Muruganar lost in devotion, gazing at Bhagavan in absolute ecstasy, almost as though he were devouring Bhagavan's love. This moved Vishwanatha Swami deeply, and he thought, he has met with so much disappointment, and yet he is able to transcend it by looking at Bhagavan and getting lost in his devotion. Without realizing what he was doing, he began to repeat Muruganar's poetic name, Mugavapuri, Murugan. Under his breath, Bhagavan heard him and turned to him, saying, Vishwanatha, what is the use of repeating his name so many times? Why don't you compose a verse with those two words? Obeying Bhagavan's command, Vishwanatha Swami took a piece of paper and tried to compose a verse with those two words. But, however much he tried, he could not write more than those two words. After several unsuccessful attempts, he finally gave up. He placed the sheet of paper with those words before Bhagavan and left the hall. That's all, folks. Let's continue in the next chapter. Thank you. Bye bye. Rama Rama Pupodu.